homicide files are on the shelf. Why don't we have for reveal? Work from tomorrow. Thinking about taking a foot post in the Midtown Tunnel? It's a shaky perch you're on, Sergeant. You have to answer to the people above you, look after the people below you, and you have to be able to live with yourself. What are my chances? As far as the last two go, I'd say they're decent. Good luck with the first one. Thanks. It's all yours.
No matter how many times I see that scene, folks, I still get chills. I still get goosebumps. And we're going to talk a lot about that show as we move along. And I'll explain why that scene is so special. But the gentleman who was involved in that scene is kind enough to join us today. He's been in so many things over the years, such shows as 24, Murder in the First, The Rookie, Suddenly Susan, and of course you just saw a little clip of him on NYPD Blue where he was outstanding as Lieutenant Thomas Bale. It is my honor to introduce to you on In the Spotlight, the one and only Currie Graham. And Currie, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's a real honor for me.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I really appreciate it.
So Currie, I understand that you grew up in Canada. So the first question I have is, being that Canada is so rich with tradition of hockey, were you a big hockey fan growing up?
You know what? I was a huge hockey fan. I wasn't allowed to play hockey because my dad was, I think he was worried I'd get my feelings hurt because the coaches were tough. Or maybe he didn't want to pay for hockey equipment. I don't know. But I was a huge Montreal Canadiens fan. Still am. Still follow the Habs.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, you know, you talk about the New York Yankees of baseball. Well, the Canadians are the Yankees of hockey. I mean, I think they've won 24 championships, something like that. And I mean, you just talk about the tradition they've had in that sport, and they really are the standard in hockey.
I remember when I was a little kid, I was a huge Ken Dryden fan. I was a Guy Lafleur fan, Moblich brothers, all that stuff. But I remember before the hockey games would come on Saturday night, I would get all my goalie equipment out. Like I had like street hockey goalie equipment. And I'd put everything on and stand in the TV room and watch hockey fully dressed as a goalie.
Wow.
My dad was like, "Aren't you hot?" And I was like, "No, it's the game. It's the game."
That's a real fan right there. And I really loved watching baseball, especially in the 90s. I'm a big Yankees fan. They had that great run. But also in the 90s, the Toronto Blue Jays really had a tremendous run. They made the playoffs 3 times, won the World Series back-to-back in 92 and 93. Were you a big Blue Jays fan as well?
I was at the game when Joe Carter hit the home run and they won the World Series. I was doing a movie with John Candy, who had seats to the World Series, and he invited me. So
wow,
I went to the game and he was there, and we had a blast, and then we were funneling out of the stadium afterwards, and it's just mayhem. And he's like, "We get the fuck out of here. This is crazy." It was insane. There's thousands of people just going crazy, and he's like, "Let's get out of here."
Right. And, you know, I was never fortunate enough yet to go to the Sky Dome, but just describe what that place is like, because I hear it's awesome. And I mean, it's got such a setup.
Beautiful, beautiful stadium, and just rabid fans. They're just the best. Being in that environment during the World Series, being with John Candy, I was like, it just couldn't get any better. And then, you know, they brought in, what was the madman, or what was his name?
Mitch Williams.
Williams. They brought in Mitch Williams, and we're like, "Oh no, Mitch Williams is it's not gonna happen." And then Joe Carter just blasted one out of the stadium, and people went nuts. It was cool. It was a cool experience. It was nice to hang out with John. I have a real soft spot for him. He saw some tape or some movie that I'd done, and I was playing a killer. I was just a very violent young guy in this movie, and I got a page back when you had pagers, and I was in New York, and I got a little page. It was a number I didn't recognize, and I called it. And he said, "Is this Currie?" And I go, "Yeah, it is. Who's this?" He goes, "John Candy." I go, "Get the fuck out of here. It's not John Candy. This is John Candy." He's like, "Yes, John Candy." I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Well, I was wondering, are you funny?" And I said, "No, not at all." And he started to laugh, and he went, "You're hired."
Wow.
Like 2 weeks later, I was on a plane up in Toronto shooting a movie with him that he was directing and starring in.
And if my math serves me right, Currie, that probably was the last movie that he did, because I think he died in February of '94. So that
He
had to be
did,
the final movie he did.
because he had talked to me about another movie that he was going to direct while I was shooting that. And he said, "I really want you to do this movie." And he explained it to me. It was a comedy. And then he was away. I think when he died, he was doing a movie. I think he died in the hotel room. And I remember I was doing a pilot for Fox, and I was shooting, and a producer that produced the movie that I was in with him that he hired me for called me and said that he'd passed away. And then just to sort of make a full circle, when I was doing Murder in the First, John's son came on and was a guest star.
Oh, really? Wow.
And I remember taking him aside. It was a very emotional moment, and I was saying, "Your dad was a beautiful human being." And he got all misty, and I got all misty, and we hugged it out and went on. He was a really, really talented kid and did a great job in the scene. And it was just nice to be able to sort of relay how kind John was to me when I was starting out. And it was sweet.
And you always hear about, like, there's always those people that really help you out when you're getting your feet wet. And just him paging you and giving you a shot in one of his movies, I mean, that really had to kind of really get your career going. It was a great way to, kind of get bigger and better things as time went on.
Very validating to see a guy that I'd admired and that I thought was funny and was sort of an iconic Canadian talent to sort of validate me and say, "You know what? You're funny, you're talented, you have great ideas." I said to him at one point, I said, "Can I swear on this show?"
Oh yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so I said to him at one point, I said, "You know what, John? I used to have hair down to here, and I was playing this interior decorator who basically just banged all the women who hired him." So I said to him, "John, I think this guy should have a big penis. I think it should be huge." And John went into his bag and pulled out some socks. It's like sports socks. And he said, "Stick them in there. Stick them." And I stuck those socks down my pants. I did the entire movie with John's socks stuffed in my pants.
Yeah, that's the beauty of TV. I mean, you could always do a variety of things. But let me ask you though, Currie, I mean, how did the love for acting begin for you? Because I know you were a member of the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, but I mean, did you have a love for it when you were a young kid, or did it kind of just evolve as time went on?
That's a good question. My mom did a lot of local theater. I remember I auditioned for a play when I was 6 or 7, and I auditioned to play Tiny Tim. And I was not tiny. And the director called, said he did a good audition. He's just too big. And I remember being really upset about that. And I just thought, it's just silly, it's stupid, who cares? And I never really ventured back into it until later in high school. And things just started to just sort of came to me. I did some regional theater at one point for a summer job. I got hired, and then I did a play in high school, and then I was supposed to go to Western University and study medicine or pre-med or whatever it was going to be. And my drama teacher called my parents and said, "I don't know what he's planning on doing, but he should be an actor." So my parents were like, "If you want to be an actor, that's on you. You figure it out." And I remember I was sitting in the library at school, not doing much of anything, which is usually what I was doing. And I just called New York, and I called an acting school in New York. I called the American Academy, and they sent me all the stuff. Went down and auditioned.
Wow. Yes. And a lot of times, I mean, it just kind of happens by accident. I mean, you kind of are at the right place at the right time. But I mean, did you have to do like commercials or anything in the beginning? I mean, I know some people, when they try to get in the door, they have to do small parts to get to the big parts. I mean, did you have to do that early on?
I did some commercials, but excuse me, I never did any extra work or anything like that. I did some commercial auditions. I started getting hired. Then I got hired to be the replay jeans guy. And I went to Colorado and I shot for a couple of weeks and I did all this stuff and then just sort of started from there. People saw this commercial that I'd done and I helped write, and people were like, this is really good. And next thing you know, I'm, doing movies with John Cusack and just started working.
And think about that too, Currie. I mean, some of the guys that you worked with early on in your career, you talked about John Candy, you just brought up Cusack. I mean, so many people that were such established actors, and you're getting to be in their movies. And I don't care if like you have one scene or you have maybe a few. When you can be in a movie with accomplished actors like that, that is a great. I mean, that you're doing something right because they don't ask you for these parts unless they know you could do them.
Yeah, like one of the first movies I did was the cast wasn't a great movie, but the cast just being introduced to these people was Philip Seymour Hoffman,
Another great actor. Yeah.
Michael Madsen, Michael Rappaport, John Cusack, James Gandolfini. It was we were all in this same show. Benicio del Toro got the part that I thought I was going to be playing, and then I ended up playing something else. But it was just being around those guys. You sort of go, oh, maybe this is where I should be. Maybe this is going to be okay.
Right. Now, let me ask you, you just brought up Gandolfini. Now, we know what his career would be. And I mean, he's one of the most iconic characters of all time, Tony Soprano. But just doing like that stuff with him early on before he really became famous, was it surprising to you, or you weren't really surprised when you saw how well he did? Because
he and I had sort of for True Romance, it was between he and I for the guy in the bathroom who was smashing people up with the toilet and all that stuff. So it was between he and I. We both screen tested with Tony Scott, and my agent called me and said, they're really interested in you. Would you do a local hire in LA? Blah, blah, blah. I was living in New York. And I'm like, I didn't know what that is. So yes, I love the part. I thought it'd be great. Then the studio called and said, well, they wanted, because I played it crazy and he played it like a boxer. He played it like a big thug and I played it like a maniac.
Yeah.
And they went with the boxer. And when we were on set on the movie that we're doing together, he asked me, is there any part? And I didn't know he got it. I had no idea. And he said to me, is there any part that you really wanted that you didn't get? And I'm like, yeah, God damn it. I really wanted to do this movie, True Romance. And he was like, oh, what part? And I said, the crazy guy that goes in, and he goes, yeah, I did that. You son of a bitch. Oh my God. But he's just a really talented dude.
I think he got that part, or it was because of that movie that he got the part of Tony Soprano, because David Chase had saw him on that movie and really liked how he acted. And the one thing I really liked about James, because I read about it over the years, he would not ever do interviews if it was about him. He did not want the attention on him. So he would do an interview if it was about somebody else, like if they were asking him to comment on Steven Van Zandt or something like that. Yeah. But he never was comfortable about doing interviews about himself because he just didn't really want the attention to be on him. And that's pretty cool because he became a famous actor, but he never forgot that he was still a human being. And I really admired him for that.
When he renegotiated his contract with HBO, and he got paid, and the rest of the cast did not.
Right.
He took his first paycheck that he got, I think it was $750,000, and he divided it up among the cast members.
Right.
So everybody got a taste of his success as well. So he never left anybody behind. He was always very supportive, and I always admired him for that. And in working with Philip in that movie, there was a scene we were doing, and John Cusack pulls out all this money that he'd found, and Philip didn't have any lines, but I heard his reaction to seeing this big wad of money. We were all like poor dock workers in the movie. And his reaction to that money was so honest and so great. I remember thinking, that guy's fucking great. That guy's special. Yeah. And we became friends and we hung out afterwards. And I think he broke my rib in that movie. We got in a fight, and he broke my rib, and he came to hospital with me, and we ended up hanging out. We became really good friends.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, Curry. I'm glad you brought that up because it's something I always wondered. A lot of times, I think people think with the fight scenes and shows, movies, nobody gets hurt, but uh, actors do tend to get hurt sometimes. I mean, you see it a lot, and so I mean, what is the challenge when you're doing like a fight scene? I mean, how do you and the actor you're working with try to make sure that you protect each other so you don't get hurt?
Well, I think there's always inherent. I mean, accidents happen. I've worked with really, really established actors who are like, I've done a million stunts and I'm going to punch you. And then they don't punch me quite right. And I get a bloody nose, or, like Philip went off and beat me with the receiver of a phone and popped a rib. But I think for the most part, actors are very conscious of being professional about not messing each other up. And I've worked with
Right.
actors who felt like they were a little out of control. And I remember saying to this one actor, I was doing a movie in another country, and he was leading this thing. And we were rehearsing this fight, and he always got out of control. And I remember saying to him, "If you get out of control, I'm gonna hit you hard, man. I'm gonna hit
Yeah.
you really hard." And we got into the fight scene on screen, and he got out of control, and I pounded him, and it sort of shocked him, and he was like, "Oh God, oh my God!" And after that, he was completely fine. So I think there's a sort of fine line between let's make it real versus let's make it realistic.
Yeah. Exactly. So, first big role that I remember seeing you in was a show called Suddenly Susan, and I thought that was a great show. And the thing that I really think stands out, Curry, that tells me what a great actor you are is Thursday nights was huge for NBC. That was their night. That was their night for ratings, and for you to be on a popular show at the time, and you're going to play this big part in that season. I mean, right there, that had to be a good feeling for you saying to yourself, you know what, I'm on my way to something. So talk about being on that show and working with Brooke
Well,
Shields.
how that happened was interesting because that year that I got that show, I had done a pilot for Warner Brothers, and at the time, Peter Roth was the head of Warner Brothers, and I guess he liked what he saw, what I did in the pilot. So when this role came up on Suddenly Susan, they brought me to the studio. They brought me to Warner Brothers to do a test, and the producers had filled my ears with notes and all of this stuff, and they brought me in, and I did it. And I shit the bed. I was not good. Like the room was silent, and I was like,
Right.
I guess I'm not a comedian. Oh, well, I was a young actor. Well, oh, well. And I'm on my way out, and Peter Roth gets up and he said, "Curry, wait." And he takes me out in the hallway, and he goes, "What are you doing?" I go, "Well, I'm doing what they want." And he goes, "Okay, that's good, fair enough. Do you want to do what you want?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Why don't you take a minute, come back in, do what you want?" I go, "Okay." So I take a minute and I sort of go, what are my choices? What do I want to do? I walk in, I do the audition. People are laughing. Everybody's happy. And I'm walking in the parking lot, and a car pulls up next to me, and it's Peter Roth. We're at the NBC building, and he's pulling out to go back to Warner Brothers, and he pulls up and he puts the window down. And I say, "Peter, thanks a lot for that. That was a great note, and I really appreciate that." And he goes, "Well, you'll get to appreciate me a lot more when I see you on set." And
Wow.
I was wow, he told me in the parking lot of NBC that I got this job.
Yeah.
And I went to work, and it was great. I'm still friends with Nestor Carbonell. Uh, we still spend a lot of time together. We write together. We hang out together. It was a great experience. Really funny people. It was great to be on the air. We were right beside the Friends stage, which was kind of funny because I remember I think it was my first regular on a TV series. And for Christmas, I remember NBC sent us these TVs. And I got this giant TV, and at the time it had like a VHS player in it. And I was like, "Wow, this is amazing!" And I remember seeing Matt Perry outside, and we were talking and we were hanging out a little bit. And I said, "Did you get it?" And he goes, "Did I get what? Did you get the gift that NBC sent?" And he goes, "Oh, yeah, what did you get?" I said, "I got this beautiful color TV, and it has a VHS thing in it, and it was awesome." And he goes, "Uh-huh, uh-huh." I go, what did you get? And he points to like a 1967 muscle car, completely refurbished, that's sitting in its parking spot. He goes, yeah, I got that. I was like, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I see how it's going.
And I always felt like that show was very underrated. I thought the writing was very well done and it was very funny. I mean, people forget how funny that show was. I just think at the time, what kind of hurt that show is it kind of, in their final season, so many other shows had come out that really hit it big that year. And I mean, lots of times too, when, time slots are being moved and things like that, sometimes you're a victim of your own success.
And I think it was hard too because there was an actor on the show at the end of season 3, he killed himself.
Yeah.
And I think that was
That was very hard. Yeah.
it's hard to do. It's hard for the audience to go back to a show and watch it knowing especially a comedy,
Yeah.
knowing that the actor who was there killed himself. And I
Yeah.
remember being on stage like the first couple of days and rehearsing, and people were very emotional about it. It was a very emotional time.
Right.
And I don't think that makes it any easier.
No, definitely not. Now, you've done a variety of things, and one of the shows that you did that you did like a few episodes. It was a very popular show. It was 24. Kiefer Sutherland was tremendous. Talk about your time on there, because I mean, talk about writing. I thought that show could hold its own with any show that was out there at the time, especially the way they wrote that series. It was tremendous.
Yeah, I loved working with those guys because when they brought me in, we were sort of talking about what this character would be and what kind of terrorist he would be, what kind of bad guy he would be. And I sort of brought up the whole Serbian thing because it was going on at the time. And I sort of brought all that up and they wrote to it. They were like, can you do an accent? Yeah. Can you learn some Serbian? And I'm like, whatever you want. And so they really wrote to what we talked about in the room. And I got on set and, Kiefer was great with me. I have to say, I know he can be, uh, he's very specific about his work, and he has a very strong work ethic, and like when it's action and cut, he is 100%.
Yeah.
And I think he appreciated the fact that I showed up with the same mentality. And we worked together years later, and we sort of talked about 24 and uh, how much we enjoyed working together.
Yeah. And over your career, I mean, you've had a tremendous career. You've proven that you could do comedy, you could do drama, you could also be a great good guy, but you could also be a really bad guy, a bad villain. And one movie that I really liked of yours was By Appointment Only. And God, did you play a sadistic person in Jack Brenner? I mean, in the beginning, I'm saying to myself, I'm trying to figure out, is he going to be a bad guy? But I mean, man alive, I mean, you were tremendous in that. And I think sometimes people overlook that movie because that was a great movie as well.
That was fun to shoot, and sometimes when you find the right script and the right director, and they just let you do your thing, they let you just go for it.
Yeah.
And that was one of those situations where they were just sort of like, you know what, you do you build this character, and we'll shoot it.
Did you like playing bad guys in movies and stuff? I mean, did you enjoy that? Because you get to just act and do it however you want. And, you get to play that character and make him just like this vicious person. Did you like that? Or
I do like playing bad guys. I find that there's more opportunity for comedy. There's more opportunity for cleverness. There's just it's a bigger stretch sometimes for me anyway as an actor. Sometimes it's a bigger stretch to play a bad guy to find the heart in those guys, right?
yeah.
Like there's got to be something likable about the guy. There's got to be, you have to create something where the audience goes, well, maybe he's not so bad, and then he does some really heinous shit.
Yeah. And then I really felt like the role you played in this film, you should have got some nomination for a Golden Globe or something. But I mean, the job you did in the J.J. Harper series as Robert Cross, Constable Robert Cross. I mean, you were tremendous in that. And talk about that, because I mean, you just gave like a 5-star performance, and I really enjoyed that.
Well, thanks, man. I got nominated for that. I didn't win, but I got nominated for that, and it was Ann Wheeler directed it. She's a super talented lady. It was an interesting experience to sort of walk on set with all these indigenous, Native Canadians, Native indigenous people, and have them look at you because it's a true story, and have them look at you and like, God, we hate you.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to them when we first started shooting, I was like, just remember, I'm gonna play this character. I'm gonna play it all the way, but I'm not this guy.
Right.
So if you get your feelings hurt while I'm working or whatever, just remember, I'm not really this guy. It's just, and they were great. They were completely supportive, and I think that if they weren't, I wouldn't have been able to give a performance. You know, everybody has to sort of buy into it to make it work. I
Yeah.
know Adam Beach was great to work with. Lovely guy. We had a lot of fun.
Now, let me ask you, Curry. One of the things that I think is difficult for an actor sometimes is, I'm sure this has happened to you. You see a script and you could just like tell right away this is not good writing, because not every script is going to be great, and there's going to be some bad films. I mean, how do you deal with that, knowing that when you're going to play a character, or you're going to play in a film or something, and you may not think that this is good writing? How do you get yourself through shooting those movies so
Yeah.
they're
I try not to judge the writing. I think my job as an actor is to, if I'm going to accept a movie, if I'm going to take an offer, my job as an actor is to take what they've written and make it work. And I think that's what good actors do. I think there's always room for collaboration. You can talk about scenes, you can talk about lines, you can talk about things with people, maybe make it better. But I really believe that as an actor, my job is to be of service to the script.
right.
And I wouldn't, if I didn't believe that I could do that, if I didn't think I could be of service to the script, if I didn't think I could step into this character without judging the material, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
I don't think it'd be fair to the producers, to the writer, to the people putting up the money to go in and have judgment about their material. So sometimes I read stuff and it's an offer and I go, oof, I don't know. And then other times I read stuff and go, well, it's not great, but I can make it better. Either way, if I show up on set, I'm all in. I'm all in every time I go.
Yeah.
And I think
Now,
that's playing bad guys too. It's like, I don't care if people hate me. I care if they don't feel anything. Like
yeah.
if people see something I've done, they're like, "Oh my God, you're such a horrible bastard." I go, "Great, at least you're feeling something."
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
worried about, "Oh, do you like me?" or is there redemption? Or I'm not so worried about that. I just play it. I play it to make it real. And if you hate me, great.
Right. Another iconic series that you got to do a few episodes in, and it was a updated version of the series, was Dallas. And you got to do that around 2014. And I mean, think about this. I mean, you're getting to work again with established actors such as Patrick Duffy, Linda Gray. I mean, too bad. It's unfortunate you weren't able to work with Larry, but I mean, just talk about doing those few episodes, because that had to be pretty neat as
It
well.
was fun. It was fun to do it. It was kind of a wacky role, and a friend of mine was directing. Actually, Stephen Bochco's son was directing, so he called me up and he said, "I got this weird character. Can you come make it work?" And I'm like, "Absolutely," because I never say no to those guys. And I went there and I spent some time with Patrick, and he was such a great guy. He was a really good dude, really, really smart guy, really grateful, really humble.
And
Uh,
you talk about him. He later on in his career, after the first installment of Dallas ended, he was on a sitcom for about 7 years called Step by Step. And let me tell you, I always just looked at him as Bobby Ewing, but when I saw him do Step by Step, I could not believe how funny he was. He was hysterical on that show, and it just goes to show that actors could do anything if they are passionate enough about what the script is, what they're doing. And he proved that, because you could look at him on Step by Step and you don't see Bobby Ewing. You see Frank Lambert, and that's a credit to him.
no, he's and I think he's a smart guy, and he's funny in person. I mean,
Yeah.
he's very charming and he's very funny and he's a bright guy. So it doesn't surprise me that he went back and forth between the two mediums. I think good actor is a good actor, and you can do comedy, and you can do drama. And he was an iconic character.
Yeah.
I mean, Bobby Ewing is an iconic television character. So for him to be able to transition in to do, sitcom it's impressive.
Yeah, it really is. Now, the series I've been waiting to talk to you about, because I got to tell you, Curry, that one season, the final season that you played in NYPD Blue, let me tell you, I mean, you deserved an Emmy nomination. I really believe this. But the first thing I want to ask you is, number one, how did the part come about for you, or how did you audition for that? And if I remember correctly, you were in an episode of NYPD Blue very early on in the season. So it's kind of crazy that like maybe 7 or 8 years later, you came back to the show playing a regular. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I had done Stephen Bochco had a show on the air called Philly.
Yes.
And I believe it was Kim Delaney was doing the show.
Yep.
And I was brought on to play this guy. It was a very funny character who escapes from prison by pretending to be someone else. He just lies and says, "Are you so?" They say, "Are you so and so?" They say yes, and they release him, and he goes to his lawyer's house. And I did this role, and I went in to meet Steven with this part, and I did it, and he just saw something, and he gave me this role. So when NYPD Blue came around, he brought me in to read, and I had a very, very different take on it. And I went in, I read for him once, and before I got home, they'd made the offer.
Right. And you know what's crazy, Curry? I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was so mad, and it's nothing against you, but I was so mad that they had gotten rid of John O'Donohue. He had been the sergeant the year before, and I really wanted that character. Like they always kind of made him like a comedic character. He was never somebody they took serious, and I really wanted Sipowicz to kind of respect Eddie Gibson. So I was so disappointed. But I'll tell you what, after your first episode, that went away quick because I think the show needed Sipowicz to have some type of rivalry again. He kind of had that a little bit with Arthur Fancy, but he needed somebody that was going to really test him and see if he could get through it. So I mean, it was just unbelievable how that all came about. But let me ask you, did you know going in that Bale was going to be like sometimes good, sometimes bad? Because he wasn't, even though in the first few episodes he's micromanaging like crazy, you saw these little hints that he had a decent side to him. So just let me ask you, what did they want out of you from that character?
I'd sort of talked to Steven about it and the writers, and what we'd sort of come down to is that I wanted to, my idea was to run the precinct like a CEO of a company.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I'm not going to be buddy with you. I'm not going to be your friend. I'm not going to be, we're not going to go out for drinks together. I'm going to run this like a tight ship, and it's my way or the highway. And I think it was great for Dennis because it created such deep conflict, because I don't know that any boss, any lieutenant had ever spoken to him the way I did.
Yeah. And the thing is too, Curry, is he kind of, Sipowicz kind of backed down from Bale early on. Like he kind of bit his tongue a lot, where he never did that with any other lieutenant. He basically, if he felt like they weren't doing something right, he spoke up. And I thought that first scene where like Bale and Sipowicz disagree is when Bale interferes with their interview and he talks to the guy, and they're trying to talk to him in the office, and Bale's just basically, giving him a lukewarm attitude, like we're done here, guys. We're done. So, I mean, right away, I think you were going to see from in that season that this was going to be a difficult transition for Sipowicz and the rest of the, crew on, in the 15th precinct. So, I mean, were you satisfied with that first episode saying, you know what, we got something really good here?
Yeah, I knew when I read the writing. I knew. Obviously, I knew Dennis's work. I'd worked with him a few years earlier because I'd come on and played some racist piece of shit who killed a bunch of people, and so I kind of knew what his work was. And then the writing that they delivered was Billy Finkelstein and Stephen Bochco. The writing was so great. It was so tight. It was so good. And I knew Dennis and I we had chemistry.
Yeah,
We,
definitely.
we both were like, we both wanted to kill each other.
Yeah.
And
But
I felt like it really translated. Sometimes you have that chemistry with people and then you watch and you go, well, I don't know if it really translated to the screen. There was no doubt in my mind from the very first day that he and that this would transfer to the screen, that we would be able to see this tension.
yeah. And
This,
the funny thing is too, Curry, is like Bayo would nitpick at everything, like he's busting his chops about getting an oil change for the car, and he's telling them to do it right then and there. And then he's also telling everybody you have to sign the book when you go in and out.
oh yeah.
So Bayo had these things, but the one thing that Bayo was doing that people may not have realized, and if you watch the reruns a lot, you see it. He may have been a pain in the ass to them in front of them, but behind their back he was backing them up, he was defending them. And no, you see that right away when Sipowicz could have lost his job when he put the gun to Stan Hatcher's head, and Bayo goes to bat for him. And I thought that told me that even though Bayo's going to be difficult and he's going to bust chops, he's going to have the officers' backs whenever something comes
And
up.
that again, comes down to the writing. Is that as an actor, you walk into Steve Bochco's camp, and you know that the writing is going to be there to support you. And
Yeah.
I don't have to do a lot. I have to know the words, and I have to understand my intention. But by trusting the writers to that, I'm not just going to be an asshole all the time.
Yeah.
And I leaned into being an asshole. I'm not afraid to do that because I know that at some point the writers will give me a space to be human.
Yeah.
Like when Dennis was going to write his exam to be a lieutenant.
Right.
And I'd been really hard on him, and then I gave him all my notes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's everything I know about doing it. So it was just little pieces of humanity would pop out. So the audience would be like, you know what? I hate him, but he's not all bad.
Yeah, and you could see that. And I think the worst moment in Bale's time on NYPD Blue is when he went after Medavoy for working at that bar. And the great thing is, you and Gordon had a great scene together where Gordon's basically calling you a coward, and you never lost your cool with him. I almost felt like Bale, what Medavoy was telling him, Bale could realize that maybe he shouldn't have done it, but at the same time, he was very calm and he said, I realize this is an emotional day for you. So I think maybe you go home and you come back tomorrow and start fresh. But I mean, that was a crazy scene. And I thought you and Gordon had a great dialogue in that scene.
Yeah, again, the writing is so tremendous. And Gordon, he'd been on the show for a long time. He had that character dialed in, and he was really fun to act opposite as well.
And a very underrated actor. I mean, I was so happy to see him get an Emmy because he played that Medavoy character tremendously. I really felt like everybody loved Medavoy.
Oh, they did. I think they really did, and he was really good at it. And you know what? Everybody was really good people.
Right.
Like you go, it's sort of a trickle down effect. I think, like, with Bochco, the tail doesn't wag the dog, but he's a very generous, kind guy, and he believes in his craft, and he runs a tight ship. But within that, we had so much fun. He became a great friend and mentor to me for years.
Yeah. I mean, he was tremendous. I mean, think about all the series he did. Hill Street Blues. I mean, even Doogie Howser, which was like a comedy, but with drama filled into it. And he did a great job with that. And I mean, the guy was just a talent with everything he did.
And he was another one of those people that I found sort of validated my existence as an artist. I mean, we finished when we finished NYPD Blue. I got a call from him, and he said his assistant said, Stephen wants to have lunch with you at the Fox commissary on whatever day it was, at whatever time, at Stephen's table. Okay, I didn't know Stephen had a table at the commissary, and I went to the commissary, and I thought, I don't know what this is about. And I sat down with him, and we talked, and he said, he was so kind. He said so many kind things to me, and he said, I just want you to know that every show I do from now on, You're in.
Wow.
And I was like, that's, you know, I mean, you hear it all the time. I hear that, you hear that stuff all the time. And he said that, and it wasn't a few months later, I was on another one of his sets, and then I was a regular on another show, and that went for a few years. And then I was a regular on another show. And that, you know, he was a man of his word. He was
Yeah.
a man of his word, and he respected my work ethic. He respected my sensibilities. He respected the fact that I had his back as a producer, as a showrunner, as a creator. Um, we became good friends. We used to have lunch all the time, and you know what? I miss him. I
Yeah, and
miss
he
him.
really was a credit to the business. He really was. I mean, he was tremendous in everything he did. Um, Now, I look at some of Bale's finest moments. Number one, when Sipowicz becomes sergeant, you know it's Bale that organized all those guys to stand and salute him as he's walking down the stairs. And you see that Bale is proud that he got sergeant. So that told me that Bale wasn't really a bad guy. He was a ball buster, but he did respect people's work ethics and what they did. So I thought that was a tremendous scene. And then he also put in a call so Sipowicz could stay with the 15th precinct. And then, of course, the biggest moment is when he realizes he's going to retire. He gets shot, and he doesn't feel like he can work anymore. And he basically tells Andy Sipowicz, if you want this job, I'll recommend you for it. And I just thought, and I brought this up, and we played a clip of it. That scene with you and Dennis, where you're, giving him advice, and then he puts his hand out and he shakes your hand, and when you say to him, it's all yours. I mean, that was just tremendous TV. And I thought it was awesome for you because you got to be a part, even though you weren't on that show, for most of its run. In the end, you got to be in like one of the final scenes and have a great moment with Dennis, who was a 4-time Emmy winner. And he really was NYPD Blue. And I thought that was just awesome. And that had to be a proud moment in your career.
Yeah, it was. I think that I remember shooting that scene. It was a very emotional day for everybody because it was the last day of shooting.
Yeah.
And so everybody was very emotional about it. Dennis was emotional. Everybody was very emotional about it. And I felt like the way they structured the shooting schedule to put those scenes at the end of the entire series to make us shoot those on the last day just added another quality of emotional life to the scenes. And it was a great experience. It was a great experience.
And now, did you and the cast know that that was going to be the final season, or did they decide it midway, or did you
Well,
know going
I
in?
mean, there were some. I mean, I'd been there was some rumblings about maybe doing a couple more. So I came on, and ABC liked the chemistry between Dennis and I. So there was sort of some rumblings about maybe we could do a couple more. And I remember Dennis coming, talking to me, said he'd think about it, and he came to my trailer one day and he's like, I've been doing this character for basically 30 years.
Yeah.
So I understood. I totally got it. Look, selfishly, I would be like, yeah, fucking, let's do a couple more, and I can, blow the lid off this thing. Hang on, plug in my computer. I'll blow the lid off this thing. But I understood what he was saying. I knew that he'd given his entire life to, this character, and that, he was done. And I remember talking to him, and he was like, I'm not just done with this. I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
done acting.
Yeah. And he
And
really never did act again
no, he
after
never
that.
did again.
Yeah.
He got sent scripts. We had the same agents. And I remember them saying that he sent him some scripts and stuff, but he never did. And I've seen him a couple times, but he never did again. And when he said he was done, he was done. And you know what? Rightly so. Because
Right.
he gave everything he had for 30 years.
Oh, I mean, it
That
was
guy, that guy came to set every day, never asked for lines, always knew his stuff, was always totally prepared, was 100% there every single day. And I had I remember, I'll tell you a story. We were doing a scene. This sort of sums up who Dennis was as a person. We were doing a scene one day, and there was an actor. It was me and Dennis and a guest star. And the guest star was nervous. He was nervous. And so it came around to his coverage, and he couldn't get it out. And people were getting frustrated. And he went to do another take. He went to start again, and he couldn't get it out. And Dennis said, "You know what, guys? Can I just stop for a minute? I just got to get some. I got to get some water." Dennis threw himself under the bus, and he
Yeah.
took the guy and he walked him over to craft service, and they had a coffee, and they hung out, and they talked for like 5-6 minutes, and everybody waited. And the kid came back, and his feet were on the ground. He was back inside his body. He felt totally fine. And Dennis said, "Okay, I feel good now. I'm ready. I'm ready."
Yeah.
And the kid did the scene. We got it all out. And I remember saying to Dennis afterwards, "That's one of the nicest fucking things I've ever seen a number one do on a set."
Yeah. It
Because
really is.
most of the time, a guy would go like, "Oh, come on, man," or whatever it is. Get your shit together. He didn't do that. And
That
I
says a lot
admired
about
him
him.
for that. And I remember clocking that going, I want to be that guy too. I want to
Right.
be that guy.
And interestingly enough, Curry, I bet fans probably didn't realize this. I don't even think you were 40 yet when you got this part. Like, you were their boss and stuff, but you were younger than like Gordon and Dennis. And I don't think people probably realized that because you had to play their superior and you acted so much. Not that like once you're in your 30s, you're going to be mature, but still, you really like played that part to perfection. I mean, you really looked like a boss in the working field. And I mean, where would you rank that role in your career? I mean, where would you put it if you had to put it?
It was definitely top five of
Top
anything
five,
I've
yeah.
ever done. And not just the role, but the experience itself, what the experience meant to me, not only as an actor, but for my career, for my friendships, for my relationship with Steven, what it taught me. There's so many things that happened when I got that role that changed my life.
Right.
Changed my life as an artist and as a man, as a just a human being. Being able
Right.
to go to lunch, once a month or twice a month with Steven and sit down and talk about, what are you writing? What are you reading? How's your kid? What's going on? What's happening? All that other life stuff, right? As opposed to just business. It's about life.
Yeah.
And he was great about it. He really, that role opened a lot of doors, uh, and it opened a lot of avenues for me in terms of friendships and just being seen differently in the industry.
Right. And so let's talk about 2023. What do you got in store for maybe in the next few months? I mean, anything lined up that we could look forward to seeing? Because I know you keep going. You haven't stopped and you're still
No,
working.
I'm waiting for some things to. There's a show that I did for AMC that hasn't aired yet, called Parish. Boom.
Yeah.
Happened to be wearing a hat. And then I did 1923 with Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren. So
Oh, wow.
I did the last couple episodes of that. So I think this spring I will head back to Montana and be another asshole, be another hard-assed man.
Yeah.
I work with Timothy Dalton mostly on that show,
Right.
he was an amazing guy, just an amazing dude.
Yeah. And let me ask you, Curry, I mean, in the type of work you do, there's never a time really for a break. I mean, you're constantly working and it's, long hours sometimes and things like that. But I mean, does the drive is obviously still there and you love what you do, correct? I mean, there's not a single regret. Everything that you've been doing and you've done in the past, you have been satisfied with everything, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always looked for more. I'm a seeker. I want to seek out more. I want to seek out new experiences, new challenges. I've last few years I've started writing a lot and sold some stuff, and so I'm busy creating as well, which is exciting for me and learning a new skill. And it fills in the time, between takes or
Right.
between, days. You go to Montana and you work a day and then you're off for 4 days. And believe me, where we're shooting, there's not a lot to do. There's a
Yeah.
Walmart superstore and some gas stations, and that's about it. So you hold up in your hotel room and I write
Yeah.
and I create. So I sold a series a few months ago, and I'm working on got a script option for something else, and I got another thing in the works. So it's been good. And I know I put that all back to Bochco. You know, he's like, your job is to create whatever
Yeah.
that is. You're going to create as an actor. You're going to create as a writer. You're going to create what you have to create.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I got you, man. And that's what I do. You know,
Right.
I try to do it every day. I was writing this morning and wrote all day. So
Right. Now,
yeah,
let me ask you, Curry. You talked about John Candy, how working with him, what it meant to your career. Is there one actor or actress that you haven't worked with that you would love to work with? Maybe do one film with, or even do a guest spot with. I mean, who's that one actor or actress out there that you would love to work with?
who's the guy that does Perry Mason?
Raymond.
The
Well,
guy who's on HBO right now. He's phenomenal.
yeah.
I
I'm
can't.
not sure because I remember Perry Mason, but the older ones.
No, it's the new one, and I think he's fantastic. Um, I'm trying to think who else I would. That's a great question. Matthew Reyes.
Yeah.
Matthew Reyes is phenomenal. I don't know. I mean, there's so many talented people, and there's so many new people, and
Yeah.
um, to work with.
I mean, I would love to see you. When I watched you working with Dennis and the chemistry you have, I always said I would love to see you work with David Caruso and something. But you know,
I did an episode of that show.
Miami, CSI
Yes, I am.
Miami.
I
Yeah,
did an episode of that. I'll tell you another actor I worked with who blew me away was James Spader.
yeah, he is excellent. Yeah,
That guy, man, he is so freaking talented. He's so talented. It
yeah, he
was
really is. I mean, he's a credit to the business. He really is.
amazing to watch him. And he was another guy that sort of took me under his wing, who was very kind and very supportive and very inclusive. He was a very kind of an aloof guy, kind of kept to himself, but whatever reason, I was at work, he would always call my dressing room and be like, come on over, I'm sculpting. I'm doing sculpting. And I'd go over
Yeah,
and hang out and laugh. And he was such a talented guy and a sweet guy. A lot of respect for him.
right. So before we go, Curry, what would you say to the fans who continue to support you, who have supported you over the years? I mean, what would you say to them? I mean, like as far as what they've meant to you in your career, because I think any actor who says the fans don't mean something to them, I don't want to say they're lying, but they're not being, 100% truthful, because I really think it's important when an actor knows that people follow their work. It makes them,
Well, I
it
think
gives them a lot of drive.
it's everything. I think that's
Yeah.
the reason. I think it's the reason I continue to get work. I think it's the reason I continue to be employed. I think it's the reason that I love what I do so much, because I know that people are entertained. I know that people have feelings. Sometimes I get emails, or not emails. I get tweets and stuff that are like, "I want to kill you," and I'm like, I'm so glad that you feel that way. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Um,
And as an actor, you've done a great job, because if they hate you, you're playing that character the way you're supposed to.
I'm okay with it. People
Yeah.
ask me sometimes in interviews like, "Oh, don't you get tired of people hating you?" And I'm like, I would be tired if people. I would be upset if
If they
people
didn't.
watched me
Yeah.
and felt nothing.
Yeah.
I if they love me or hate me, great. But to be ambiguous, to feel nothing, that's a scarier idea for me. So when I step into a bad guy, I'm gonna fucking play a bad guy. Like on
Yeah.
1923, I remember Harrison Ford came up to me and he was like, don't be afraid to be bad, because bad here is good, and everyone's bad, and everyone's good, and I'm bad, and I'm good. And he was great.
Right.
We laughed our heads off. But I think that, that's what moves people. We
Right.
all, we all want to hate somebody. We want to love somebody.
Now, I really believe if they hate a character, like especially in Sopranos, we were talking about that. I hated the character Ralphie, and I couldn't stand the character Richard, and that's a credit to those actors that played those parts, because if you hate them, they're doing what they're supposed to do.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly, exactly.
really. Well, Curry, this was a real honor for me. Number one, I really think you're the cat's meow. You're that good, and you've done a tremendous job. Thank you for that one season on NYPD Blue, because I mean, I watched season 12 a lot because the dialogue that you and Dennis have is tremendous, and just so many other things I've gotten to see. And I mean, you were tremendous in Suddenly Susan. I mean, I loved the episodes you did in Murder in the First. I mean, you're just a tremendous talent and a credit to the business, and I really do applaud you, and I appreciate you giving me a few minutes today.
Oh, Mike, it's my pleasure, and thank you so much. I really appreciate your recognition and your kind words. It means a lot.
Well, thank you. And folks, there you have it. I mean, this is one of TV's unsung heroes. I mean, if you get the chance to watch his work or follow his work, please do, because this is a tremendous talent and you don't know what you're missing. So please, if you haven't seen him yet, check him out because he's all over the place. For In the Spotlight, I'm Mike Kenichi saying good night, everyone.